So if you've been on TikTok lately, you might have come across videos of women talking about taking Pepcid AC, yes, the heartburn medication, to relieve their PMDD symptoms. And maybe you're thinking, okay, that's random, but also, is it? Because if you've experienced PMDD, you know you will try basically anything when you're in it. I know, because I have been there. And here's the thing, there's actually a really fascinating reason that some of those women, a lot of those women, are feeling better. It's not random at all. But there's a really important piece of the story that's missing from all of those videos that I think you need to hear to make an educated decision before you go grab a box of Pepcid off the pharmacy shelf. Because when you understand why it might be working, and I mean the actual underlying mechanism, it's actually going to point you towards something that works even better and that's not going to trash your digestion in the process. So that's what we're getting into today, the real science behind the PMDD and histamine connection, why antihistamines and H2 blockers seem to help, the downside of using them long-term, and 5 supplements you can actually stack together that support the same systems without the side effects. Hi, I'm Kelsey Ale. I'm a certified functional nutritionist and a restorative wellness practitioner, and I'm the founder of Audrey. We help women relieve early perimenopause symptoms and hormonal imbalances using natural remedies, supplements, lifestyle, and nutrition. So if that sounds interesting to you, go ahead, subscribe to our channel, make sure you hit the bell to be notified when we post a new video, and if you could, please give this video a thumbs up and a like. It really helps out our channel a lot. All right, so I want to start by saying something that I really wish someone had told me when I was experiencing PMDD, because I really didn't have any of this information to work with at the time, and I think it probably would have changed a lot about my experience. So for a long time, the medical understanding of PMDD was basically your hormones fluctuate before your period. Some women are more sensitive to that. Here's an antidepressant, have a nice day. Which, I mean, is not helpful, and it's not the full picture, not even close. What the research is showing us now is that PMDD isn't just a hormone sensitivity issue. In some cases, it can also be an immune system issue. Specifically, it can involve a molecule called histamine, which a lot of us probably think about as the thing that makes us sneeze during allergy system. And it's an instance of this molecule behaving in a very destabilizing way inside the brain and the body in the lead up to your period. And here's the thing that gets me, is that scientists have actually known since the 1980s that histamine is actually a neurotransmitter, which means it's a chemical messenger that the brain uses. It's not just an allergy molecule. And that knowledge really just never made it out of the basic neuroscience research and into clinical women's health practice. Probably in large part because there aren't enough studies on women's health in general, which is its own conversation, and partly because the allergy pharmacology is where all of the clinical attention went. And when you understand that piece, the Pepcid thing actually makes a lot of sense. And so do the natural solutions that I want to walk you through today. So let's start with the mechanism. This is going to be the why behind this happens. It's going to make a lot click into place, but if you just want the remedies and the supplements, you can go ahead and fast forward the video. But histamine is fundamentally excitatory in the brain. Too much histamine produces symptoms that can look like severe anxiety, racing thoughts, insomnia, and the classic tired but wired feeling. And here's where your hormones come in. Estrogen actually has a direct relationship with the immune cells that store and release histamine. They're called mast cells. So when estrogen raises, it tells mast cells to release more histamine into the system. And at the same time, elevated estrogen suppresses the enzyme that your body normally uses to clear histamine, called diamine oxidase, or DAO. More histamine going in, less capacity to clear it out, and that is a double whammy. Now, progesterone is actually a mast cell stabilizer. So during the early luteal phase, when progesterone is high, it's kind of keeping a lid on that whole reaction process. A lot of women actually tend to feel okay right after ovulation for this reason if histamine is driving their PMDD. But then in the late luteal phase, right before your period, your progesterone drops, and it drops really fast, faster than estrogen. So that protective, secure lid comes off, the mast cells release all the histamine they've been holding, and you get a massive histamine dump into your system. And this coincides with something else that's happening in the PMDD brain. progesterone actually metabolizes into a calming compound called allopregnanolone. In women with PMDD, the brain's GABA receptors, which GABA is your primary calming neuron, and these are the receptors for it, they respond to GABA paradoxically, meaning GABA makes you anxious instead of calm. So when that progesterone crashes along with your GABA receptor sensitivity, it's basically like going through a drug withdrawal. Your brain loses its ability to pump the brakes. So you got a ton of excitatory histamine flooding your system right at the exact minute that the brain loses its primary calming mechanism. And so that's kind of what creates the perfect storm and why PMDD can feel as extreme as it feels when it's caused by this histamine response. And I was really personally curious about something specific when I started researching this, and you might be wondering the same thing. And that is that if estrogen is what triggers histamine release, why don't we feel awful during the first half of our period, the follicular phase 2, when estrogen is also rising? And the answer is actually what makes this mechanism so specific. In the follicular phase, that first phase, estrogen rises more gradually and progesterone is low and stable, so there's no crash and no withdrawal event. So the mast cells, they haven't been primed for weeks, and the GABA system isn't crashing. So it really does have to do with the rate of change, specifically that sharp progesterone drop that triggers the rebound. So both the histamine dump and the GABAergic collapse have to happen at the same time to create that massive PMDD reaction. So if you take either one of those out of the equation, you don't get that same chaotic storm, which is also why some women might notice a subtler dip right at ovulation when estrogen peaks and then briefly drops. Same histamine mechanism, just a little bit smaller because progesterone hasn't had time to prime the mast cells yet. And this is why an antihistamine can genuinely provide relief. It actually makes complete sense when you understand this underlying function and process. So let's talk about why the medications being discussed online are not the solution I'd recommend long term. And then I'm going to give you some alternatives, actually 5 supplements that I would recommend you use instead. So Allegra and other H1 blockers work by blocking histamine receptors in your peripheral nervous system. The second generation ones don't really cross the blood-brain barrier, so they're mostly helping with the physical symptoms, which is like cyclical migraines, bloating, breast tenderness, and skin stuff. So they're providing real relief, but they're not touching the neurological piece, which is the anxiety, the mood crash, and the self-harming ideation that some women experience at their lowest PMDD points. And also long-term, you're just blocking a signal that your body is sending without really figuring out why it's sending the signal. Pepcid AC, which you might have heard more about, is an H2 blocker. It's actually a little bit more interesting mechanistically. There's real research showing that it actually can cross the blood-brain barrier at higher doses, and it can activate something called the vagal inflammatory reflex, which suppresses some of the same inflammatory molecules that drive PMDD. So the science is there, but, and this is my big concern as a gut health focused practitioner, Pepcid suppresses your stomach's gastric acid production. And gastric acid or stomach acid is not the enemy. It's how you break down protein, you activate digestive enzymes, and essentially absorb nutrients like vitamin B12, magnesium, iron, and zinc. Now, those are the exact nutrients your body needs to produce DAO, that enzyme that naturally clears histamine out of your system. So you can kind of see the problem there. It's that you're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. You're going to come up short in the end. It's short term, going to give you some relief, but long term, you're depleting the very nutrients that would help your body manage histamine on its own. So I personally don't recommend that as a protocol. What I can recommend is working with the same systems, the histamine system, the mast cell system, the inflammatory system, using targeted supplements that don't come with that negative digestive inhibiting trade-off. And I've actually gone ahead and organized all of these supplements in our supplement dispensary under the favorites category, so you can find them really easily. If you want to check out the link, it's in the description below. So let's go ahead and dive in and explore these 5 supplements. Number 1 is quercetin with bromelain. So quercetin is a flavonoid. It's a compound found in apples, onions, berries, and even capers. And it's one of the most well-researched natural mast cell stabilizers that we have. Published research shows quercetin inhibiting histamine release by around 82% from human mast cells, which actually outperformed the pharmaceutical mast cell stabilizer that's sometimes prescribed for this. Now, we want to take quercetin that's paired with bromelain because quercetin has a bioavailability problem, meaning your body doesn't absorb it well when it's on its own. Bromelain is a pineapple enzyme that significantly improves quercetin absorption, so they go really well together. One important note on taking this, quercetin works preventatively, so you have to take it before the histamine surge, not after. So if we're applying it to a PMDD protocol, you should need to be taking it consistently, or at least start taking it after ovulation at a minimum. Ideally, though, you'd be taking it ongoing because you're not going to get results from it when you're already in the crash and you need it to really do its thing. Supplement number 2 is one of my all-around favorites, and that is omega-3 fish oil. EPA and DHA physically incorporate into the mast cell membrane and alter its fluidity in a way that actually makes the activation receptors harder to trigger. Basically, omega-3s make the mast cell less reactive. Some studies have even shown a 20 to 50% reduction in histamine release with omega-3 supplementation. There is a catch here, and this matters specifically for women with PMDD, and that is quality and freshness. Oxidized fish oil does the opposite of what you want. It can be pro-inflammatory. If you're burping up fish oil taste after taking your supplements, that can usually be an indication of oxidation or malabsorption, and it can actively be creating inflammatory compounds that just make your symptoms worse. So you want to make sure you go for a really high quality, third-party tested, properly handled product with a good EPA to DHA ratio. Again, I have one linked in the favorites section of our dispensary. And for women who know they're highly histamine sensitive, or you're dealing with MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome, an algae-derived omega-3 might be a better option for you because fish oil itself can sometimes be a histamine trigger. And this is another one that's an ongoing supplement. You're not going to pulse it. You want to be taking it all the time. You want it working consistently in the background. Our third supplement is DAO enzyme. This one you are going to pulse. So DAO, remember that's a diamine oxidase, is the enzyme your small intestine normally produces to break down histamine from food. And I don't know if you remember, we talked about how estrogen suppresses the production of DAO, and that's exactly why dietary histamine can become such a problem in the luteal phase for some women. Your clearance capacity is lowest right when the histamine load is the highest. So a DAO supplement works specifically in the gut on histamine coming in from food. That could be fermented foods, aged cheeses, wine, leftover proteins even, are all high in histamine. So it's not addressing the histamine already in circulation in your system. So the scope is specific. It's not addressing the stuff that your body is creating, but the research has shown real symptom improvement for GI symptoms, headaches, and skin reactions. And if you're going to try this, you should take it 15 to 20 minutes before meals, starting around ovulation, and then running through the first 2 or so days of your period. You don't need to take it ongoing. Number 4 is vitamin C. Vitamin C has a couple of different mechanisms here. I think it's really underappreciated as a histamine support supplement. It's required cofactor for DAO. It actually needs it to function. So if you're depleted in vitamin C, your histamine clearance is going to be compromised. And then separately, it acts also as a mast cell stabilizer. And research shows a directly inverse relationship between vitamin C levels and histamine levels in the blood. One heads up, if you're histamine sensitive, citrus-derived vitamin C can actually be a trigger for some women. So if you've ever taken vitamin C and supplements have made you feel worse, that's probably why. Better options for you to try here could be rosehip-derived vitamin C, acerola berry, or a buffered vitamin C form like magnesium ascorbate, which is much gentler on the system. Again, I've got good ones linked in the dispensary. That's when you're going to be taking ongoing, not going to pulse it. And our 5th supplement is vitamin D. Vitamin D has a really specific role in mast cell stability that a lot of people, including a lot of practitioners, aren't necessarily connecting to PMDD. There are actual vitamin D receptors inside mast cells, and when vitamin D binds to them, it actively blocks degranulation pathways and reduces histamine and inflammatory cytokine release. And there is clear research on this that vitamin D deficiency can lead to increased mast cell activation. A huge percentage of women in our age range are vitamin D deficient, especially if you spend a lot of time indoors, if you live in a northern climate, if you have darker skin, if you just wear sunscreen when you go outside. Most of us don't have any idea that we're low because it's not necessarily routinely checked, and if it is checked, the traditional ranges are so wide that you can be experiencing symptoms of vitamin D deficiency while not technically being out of range. My very strong recommendation is to get tested before supplementing with vitamin D because it is a fat-soluble vitamin. If you are over-supplementing, it can build up and cause a toxicity. The optimal range is going to be different from the deficiency cutoff that your doctor might look for. I typically look for a vitamin D level around 60 or 70, so if you're working with one of our coaches or working with me one-on-one in a session, we do take this into account as part of the full picture. So links for booking one-on-one sessions are in the description. But even just asking your GP for a 25OH vitamin D panel at your next appointment is a meaningful first step. Your optimal dose depends entirely on where you're starting from. One more thing to note, diet during your luteal phase. Supplements do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to histamine management, but if you're eating high histamine foods all through your luteal phase, you're just adding to a bucket that's already full. So it's really worth being mindful of things like coffee, wine, chocolate, fermented foods, even some fresh produce like strawberries, avocados, and bananas. All of these foods are high in histamine, or they're histamine liberating foods. Particularly important to be aware of these in the window leading up to your period. You don't have to be perfect about it, but reducing the load during your most vulnerable weeks can make a real difference alongside adding in some of these supplements. We actually have a more comprehensive list of high histamine foods to reduce during luteal phase in the blog article that accompanies this video. It's on our website. You can find that link in our description as well. So to sum it all up, PMDD is not in your head, and it's not just a sensitivity to hormonal fluctuations. There's a real immunological mechanism behind it that involves histamine, mast cells, and a collapse of your brain's calming system right before your period. And so the fact that antihistamines and H2 blockers are helping some women makes complete sense. But using Pepcid long-term depletes the exact nutrients your body needs to manage histamine on its own. So I don't personally believe that's the move. Remember to review our list of the 5 supplements we recommend for supporting mast cell stabilization and reducing that histamine load on your body. So I hope this video has given you kind of a framework that actually makes sense of what's going on in your body. Please drop any questions or comments in the comments and we'll do our best to get back to you. And remember, our recommended brands of all of these supplements are linked in our online supplement dispensary. Look for the favorites category, they're all in there. And if you're watching this video and thinking, okay, I understand the histamine piece now, but I still don't have a full picture of what's going on in my body, we actually have a free hormone symptom assessment. It takes about 3 minutes, and it can help you figure out which body system is most likely out of sync and driving your symptoms, and give you a place to start in rebalancing that. The link to this is in the description below. And if you're ready to go deeper and actually build a personalized protocol together, the link to apply for a one-on-one hormone reset strategy session is down in the description as well. Make sure you check out these videos next for more tips on managing your hormones naturally. If you wouldn't mind giving this video a like, a little thumbs up, it really helps our channel out a lot. Remember to hydrate and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.